Throughout the course of human history, man has yearned to better understand his role in the universe. Through the fields of astronomy, biology, and geography, ancient scientists and scholars refined their understanding of the natural world. However, philosophy remained in particular contention throughout the classical period, as numerous fragmented schools of thought sought to gain followers and assert their validity. Throughout these struggles to conceptualize both the manner and purpose of life emerged the school of Stoicism. Emphasizing physics, logic, and ethics, the Stoics quickly cemented their ideology as one of the greatest advancements in philosophy. Their profound and wise triumphs were so monumental that we Americans continue to echo their sentiments today, a staggering 2 millennia after their inception. So, join me on a journey through time, a lesson in history, and discover the vast realm of Stoicism. It was around the turn of the 3rd century BC when Zeno of Citium founded the Stoic school of philosophy. Legend has it Zeno's interest in philosophy was spurred partially by chance. While enamoring at the teachings of Greek philosopher Socrates in an Athenian bookstore, the store owner directed Zeno to cynic philosopher Crates of Thebes, who had just happened to be walking right outside in the street. After studying with Crates, Zeno splintered off and formed his own school of philosophy, Stoicism. Founded only slightly after Epicureanism, another ancient philosophy, Stoicism is often compared to the former for its emphasis on practical wisdom, control of the self, and a solely materialistic view of the universe. After the death of Zeno, the reins of the school were passed to Cleanthes of Assos and later Chrysippus of Soli. After 206 BC, the role of the scholarch was passed to various students of the school. Some scholars of the classics believe that when the mantle of the Stoic school was passed to Diogenes of Babylon, not to be confused with famous cynic Diogenes of Sinope, a transition to Middle Stoicism occurred. While the validity of this separation is debated, it is nonetheless useful to distinguish between the early period of Stoicism and the period of change that occurred in the 1st and 2nd centuries BC. In this period, academic Carneades and other opponents of Stoicism began heavily criticizing the school. It was despite these increased intellectual attacks, however, that Stoics Panaetius and Posidonius brought the philosophy to Rome. Although he didn't identify as a Stoic, famous philosopher and rhetorician Cicero was a driving force behind Stoicism's growth in Rome. Notable Stoics served in positions close to emperors, exemplified in philosopher Seneca the Younger's association with the infamous Emperor Nero. Another Stoic philosopher, Epictetus, served as an influential figure in Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius's views on leadership. Because of the massive influence of Stoicism, evidenced by its rich history just mentioned, it's important to break the school of thought down into its constituent parts to truly understand how ancient Stoics once saw the universe. Physics is one of the 3 main branches of the philosophy. This branch covers much of what modern natural philosophy encompasses, as it attempts to explain the physical makeup of the universe. Stoics believe that everything that exists is composed of physical bodies, down to the human soul and concepts like intelligence. The only things that the radically materialist Stoics recognize as non-physical are the somewhat vague concepts of time, place, void, and lecta. While the first 3 so-called non-corporeals are rather self-explanatory, lecta is not as straightforward to comprehend. Essentially, lecta covers all potential thoughts and expressions of human emotion. The physical components of the universe are divided into the passive and active principles. The active principle consists of God, while the passive principle is composed of formless, unqualified, inert matter. The interaction between these two principles results in the manifestation of the universe, and the way the active principle acts upon the passive principle is called pneuma. Literally meaning breath, pneuma is simply described as the phenomena by which the active principle passes through the dormant matter of the passive principle. In this way, God is both formless and omnipresent, as he is intertwined in the being of every single object and is the cause of all events. In addition, the four primary elements, fire, air, water, and earth, are said to comprise the two principles. The former two compose the active principle, while the latter two make up the passive principle. Contrary to formless matter, though, the four elements have fundamental characteristics. For instance, water is wet and fire is hot. On the topic of the soul, Stoics believe that because the soul is able to actuate cause and effect in the material world, it is by definition a body. The soul, therefore, exists corporeally in the material world. When it comes to what has a soul, Stoics restrict only animals to this privilege. Plants, unable to engage in perception or complex thought, do not have consciousness. It is said that humans who have what is identified as a rational soul only develop true complex and abstract thought just prior to adolescence. Before this, humans are similar to animals in that their reactions and behaviors are based on a kind of blind impulse, not reason. The trait of complex reason and logic within humans is the reason why they are able to develop abstract ideas, such as philosophy, in the first place. In essence, the physics of Stoicism focuses on the distinction between corporeals and non-corporeals, the manner in which God animates the universe through pneuma, and the qualities of the souls of different classes of beings. Logic is the branch of Stoicism that examines language and arguments. Divided into rhetoric and dialectic, this branch delves deep into logical propositions and analyzes how they can be proven to be valid. As opposed to physics, much of this branch is completely abstract in nature, dealing with the complex premises conceptualized only by the human mind. Rhetoric, described as the science of speaking well, details how one should use language to most accurately describe one's internal thoughts. After all, Stoics believe that lecta, the idea and meaning behind written and spoken word, can never be mapped neatly onto language itself. Thus, it is vital for one to be able to manipulate language effectively to convey complex ideas. On the other hand, dialectic, which is the science of what is true, false, and neither, focuses predominantly on the true meanings behind the language and the aforementioned propositions. These propositions, regarded as the only true statements, are at the center of Stoic logic. When combined with each other, they form complex propositions. These complex propositions then result in the possibility of the truth conditions of conjunction, as in P and Q, disjunction, as in P or Q, and conditionals, as in if P, then Q. These complex propositions are the foundation of many philosophical arguments, as they cover almost any thought or debate possible. Syllogisms, which always take the form of one of the 5 indemonstrables, are another crucial form of Stoic argument. These indemonstrables, which are if P, then Q, P, therefore Q, if P, then Q, not Q, therefore not P, not both P and Q, P, therefore not Q, either P or Q, P, therefore not Q, and either P or Q, not P, therefore Q, are self-evident. While seemingly obviously simple and even redundant, these basic statements serve as a logical framework to view the world, and thus prove to be vital for Stoic philosophers. Some of these statements of Stoic logic may feel hard to grasp, but if one takes the time to understand them and how consequential they are for the way language and thought works, one will value Stoic logic as a vital tool to interpret the world. Ethics, perhaps the most referenced branch of Stoicism, covers the role of man in the universe and how man can live most effectively to gain happiness. When one thinks of Stoicism, this branch is likely what is being thought about. It is from ethics that the popular and somewhat misconceived idea of a cold, robotic Stoic emerges. Fundamentally, Stoic ethics is eudaimonist in nature. In essence, Stoics believe that the ultimate goal of one's life, or telos, is to live happily. Zeno and his first successor, Cleanthes of Assos, posited furthermore that this happiness, which is the primary goal of human life, is attained when one lives in perfect accordance and harmony with nature, and thus in perfect accordance with God himself. Stoics argue that the only way to achieve this state of agreement with nature is to attain virtue. Virtue is described by Stoic philosopher Seneca the Younger as the perfected condition of human reason. Becoming virtuous, according to Stoicism, requires one to absorb as much knowledge as possible. This is because knowledge permits one to better understand the universe, and thus enables him to alter his life to live according to its ways. In a departure from the way man thinks about the world today, however, the Stoics emphasized that things other than virtues, which are courage, justice, and moderation, and other than non-virtues, which are foolishness, injustice, and gluttony, are not directly beneficial to anyone. For instance, wealth, though seemingly conducive for a more prosperous and thus less troubled life, is not in itself a form of virtue. This gray area of concepts is identified as the indifference. For the Stoics, the idea of virtue is incredibly powerful. One of the most radical examples of the emphasis on virtue is seen in the torture case. According to Stoic ethics, a virtuous man being tortured on a rack above a fire, his body mutilated and writhing with pain, his family and friends taken away from him, is still capable and in fact guaranteed complete happiness because of his virtue. It is in this sense that the Stoics recognize happiness as not a graduated scale, but an either-or condition. One who is virtuous is happy, and one who lacks virtue cannot be happy. By extension, the aforementioned indifferents, such as health, wealth, pleasure, and reputation, are separated from a state of true happiness which is only accessible by virtue. Again, this is not to say some indifferents, like wealth and health, are not conducive to leading one to attain virtue. It is to say that only virtue itself can lead to happiness. One of the most astonishing and reprimanded claims of Stoicism is that true happiness is achieved only when one is passion-free. This claim, however, is much more understandable when the meaning of passion is broken down. Passions are described by Stoics as intense feelings directed at indifference, exemplified by greed for wealth or gluttony. It is only when these unnecessary passions are eliminated that one can focus their passion, in the modern sense, on virtues. So, believing that Stoics were all unfeeling, cold, harsh robots is simply untrue. In fact, this conception results only from a semantic misunderstanding that has festered over time. In a nutshell, Stoic ethics are the core foundation of how Stoics apply their physics and logic to the complicated emotions, desires, and fundamental role of man in the universe as a whole. Because of both the complexity and accessibility of Stoicism, its influence in the past was truly monumental. In contrast to the doctrines of philosophers Plato and Aristotle, Zeno's Stoicism was widely known by even common citizens of Athens. While other philosophies, like the ones of those aforementioned, were reserved for academic scholars, Stoicism was lectured in public areas. Even the name, Stoicism, originates from the public nature of the philosophy. Greek porches, known as stoas, were the primary area for the dissemination of Stoic belief. Part of the reason why Stoicism was adopted by so many commoners is because it addresses everyday concepts that are shared by all. Death, health, wealth, power, and suffering are relatable to all, and thus because Stoicism focuses on them, it appeals to everyone. When Stoicism moved to Rome, however, it was adopted by both everyday men and public figures. Senator Cato the Younger, as well as politician and assassin of Julius Caesar, Marcus Junius Brutus, both associated themselves with Stoicism. Roman Stoics Seneca the Younger, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius continued the philosophy into the Common Era. Their interpretation of Stoicism focused predominantly on ethics and the identity of the self, and though the fundamentally materialist view of the universe was maintained, it was emphasized less and less as time passed. It is the later Stoic interpretations, however, that continue to linger into the modern day. Nowadays, when one thinks of Stoicism, they likely disregard the core physical theory of the philosophy. Instead, the modern view of Stoicism surrounds strategies to better one's life by regulating emotions and irrational reactions to external conflicts. Though detached from some of the original values of Stoicism, this modern interpretation has proven valuable to millions of people across the globe who have studied the words of the ancient Stoics. Stoicism has had an impact on other philosophies: Greek politics, Roman politics, Christianity, the Renaissance, military ethics, cognitive behavioral therapy, and more. Put shortly, it is difficult to overstate the influence of Stoicism. So, perhaps now that you know about the fundamentals of Stoicism, you can see the world through a different lens. Though the content discussed here is abbreviated, all of the main points about the philosophy are covered. Further readings are available all across the internet if you are interested in discovering more, and primary sources, which are also documented on the web, will allow you to forge your very own interpretation of Stoicism. If you take the path of Stoicism, read the translated ancient words of all the aforementioned intellectuals. They will encourage you to abandon feckless emotional impulses. They will demand you to conduct your life to achieve virtue, and they will teach you new ways to view the meaning of life itself. Some of their ideas will seem harsh, even heartless, but once you understand how you can apply their wisdom to modern times, you may realize that in today's hyper-emotional, sensitive, and reactionary world, one would do better to follow the Stoic way.